We head into late October, Halloween less than 2 weeks away. A major weather system moves through the Rocky Mountains. A little known fact about satellite imagery: do you see those cities in the northeastern U.S.? That is artificial. It comes from a texture map set. They are real lights, but they're from different dates collected by a special polar orbiter satellite. Here's a look at actual city lights from the NOAA 20 satellite. There's New York City, there's Toronto, Detroit, and Chicago. This is from last night. And here, you can see all the different towns, some indication of the highways where the towns string together. And as you go further to the west, we get into some of the cloud textures, and they are lit up by the full moon. Let's take a look at the surface analysis for late this afternoon. This map is produced by Digital Atmosphere. This is a program that I wrote. It's available on weathergraphics.com. And I actually use grid data to import the isobars. And for the thickness, I use the Canadian RDPS. So basically 2 nations working together to produce this map right here. And the front positions, those are done by myself as a former Air Weather Service analyst and forecaster using my own experience. So the results here may differ from the NOAA and Canadian analysis. For this afternoon, we've got a large anticyclone covering the eastern U.S. that produced the freeze warnings and frost advisories over the past couple of days in that part of the country. Return flow setting up in the Great Plains, bringing up warmer air and some moisture, starting to see 40s and 50s dew points appearing in Texas. Those 50s dew points already arriving in southeastern Colorado. A strong frontal system through the northern plains into the central Rockies, and here we have a strong Pacific cold front moving through the Four Corners area. An occlusion around Flagstaff and a triple point just west of Albuquerque. Some very gusty winds in Arizona. In Phoenix, winds have been gusting up to 50 miles an hour out of the southwest, kicking up dust through the entire Phoenix Valley region. We see part of that baroclinic cloud mass across the Four Corners area, extending all the way to southeastern Arizona. Thunderstorms being reported at Gallup with 44 degrees. And as we go further west, we get into that cold core occlusion out around Flagstaff. Temperatures at this time at Flagstaff only 38 degrees with snow a little bit further to the west at Williams. At Phoenix, winds have subsided a little bit down to 28 knots there at Sky Harbor Airport. Tucson out of the southwest gusting to 32 with showers across Mount Lemmon. The water vapor imagery showing all the signs of a powerful and potent weather system. There's the occlusion. You can pick out the vortex where we have the maximum rotation. And further out to the east, that's the main baroclinic zone corresponding to the cold front and the triple point. The infrared imagery showing a similar picture with the stronger convective elements in the Four Corners area and the occlusion also visible around Flagstaff. And there's the appearance on visible imagery. You can see those gravity waves all across New Mexico into southern Colorado. So it's definitely going to be a bumpy ride for any aircraft flying through that part of the country. Here's a look at the turbulence products from the Aviation Weather Center. A large area of moderate turbulence from the surface to 18,000 feet across the southwestern U.S. and from 18,000 to 40,000 across the Rockies and the eastern Great Basin region. Here's a look at the 500 millibar heights and vorticity. This shows a very powerful pocket of energy through the southwestern U.S. The vortex, as we mentioned, around the Flagstaff area and the polar front jet wrapping around the south and eastern side of that vortex. Here's a look at the North American mid-tropospheric chart, and this does show that this is a cutoff low. The main belt of prevailing westerlies coming in from the central North Pacific across the Canadian prairies and into Quebec. large ridge across the eastern U.S., so we are seeing a change and a rapid warm-up, these ridges associated with warm advection. And that's replacing the cold air that we've had over the northeastern U.S. the past couple of days. This troughing right here starting to shift into the central states, but not much change for Texas and the Gulf Coast, and more ridging developing on the West Coast. The fact that we're in a four-wave pattern, in fact, it's almost a three-wave pattern, that means changes are going to be very slow to happen. So as we go into next week, it doesn't really look a whole lot different. Still got ridging on the East Coast, some indication of ridging also in the western U.S. This little cutoff low starts ejecting to the northeastern U.S., and we've got troughing on the West Coast once again. Anyway, going into the later part of next week, we see that we've got ridging pretty much established over the central part of the country, troughing on both coasts, and that means southwesterly flow in the western U.S., which does tend to be a little bit wet and unsettled. Meanwhile, this indicates dry and mild conditions across the eastern part of the country. A quick look at weather around the country, starting with the northeastern U.S. Well, it's getting pretty late. The days are getting shorter, so we're switching over into infrared mode. This monochrome right there, that's the infrared channel. Basically, it's the same thing as this right here, except you get a little bit of color enhancement. So pretty much the same thing. Anyway, clear skies. We had the coldest weather of the season over the past couple nights. Today, a moderating trend, lots of 60s and 70s. Let's take you back into the afternoon, a little bit of smoke from the wildfires across the northeastern U.S. For tonight, the entire Hudson River Valley under a frost advisory from West Point northward. Temperatures will be into the mid-30s, and we've even got freeze warnings around Saratoga Springs, New York. Frost advisory across western New York, around Jamestown to Buffalo and Syracuse. Frost advisory for the Amish country, Lancaster, Harrisburg, and in northeastern Ohio as well. In the southeastern states, much the same thing. A little bit of easterly flow as the residual cold from that anticyclone pushes across Florida. So mild conditions there this afternoon and evening. Highs today ranging from 69 at Atlanta to 73 at New Orleans, with 80 at Miami. Flooding problems continue across central and northern Florida. The St. Johns River, along with the Withlacoochee and Hillsborough rivers, are pretty much at flood stage. High surf and rip currents remain a significant problem along the east coast of Florida. And let's shift into the southern plains. And there we can see the start of that warm air advection. Texas kicking out that cold air, eager to return to summer. 80s starting to creep back up Interstate 35 from San Antonio to Waco this afternoon. We are seeing minor coastal flooding this evening due to high tides in the New Orleans area and from Galveston to Corpus Christi. In Texas itself, major drought starting to set up across the state into Oklahoma, and no relief in sight. We are expecting a lot of rain in New Mexico and southern Colorado, but that will be heading into Kansas and Nebraska, so very little relief. Southwest Texas and the Davis Mountains, located right here, they have crept up into the highest drought category, exceptional. And there it is. You can see it for yourself. Also, drought problems indicated in Ohio, West Virginia, and across much of the northwestern Great Plains. In the northern plains, do we have any viewers out there? I remember last year we had some viewers around the Denver area. I don't really know who else we have. A lot of our viewers are in the southern and southwestern states. For today, though, warm weather across the western Great Lakes. Highs today ranging from 68 at Chicago to 74 at Minneapolis. And that cools off rapidly as we hit that frontal zone right through here. Highs today 54 at Denver and up to 73 at Pueblo. So quite a temperature contrast along that frontal boundary. Most of the weather problems are in Wyoming, where they've had snow. a mix of winter weather advisories and freeze warnings from Rock Springs all the way up to Riverton and Worland, and as far east as Casper, up to 3 inches of snow, and temperatures will fall to 22 degrees tonight. And here you can see the impact of that front in Colorado. The frontal zone, very clearly evident, extending past Pueblo at this hour. Becomes a little bit indeterminate as we go west into the mountains because there we have the influence of that Pacific system. But the Canadian front itself running about like that, and we see temperatures have fallen into the upper 40s across Denver up to Akron and Fort Collins. Further south, much warmer, 70s, with dew points up to 52 at Elkhart, Kansas. As we've mentioned, in the southwestern U.S., getting that Pacific air, temperatures are very comfortable, 73 at Phoenix, 70 at Las Vegas, and a few upper 60s around Bakersfield. So a lot of cold air has advected into that part of the country. We do have freeze warnings for this weekend in parts of southeastern Arizona, basically around the Wilcox area and up towards Globe, in the Canyonlands up to the north of Globe and Safford. In California, well, the good news is that the 90s and 100s are gone, but we have red flag warnings across a vast area in the mountains north of Los Angeles into the Inland Empire and across much of northern California, from the northern San Joaquin Valley into the Bay Area. We are expecting this weekend north winds 30 to 55 miles an hour due to that very strong cold air advection. We do have reports of wildfires around the Oakland area this afternoon. I didn't really dig into the news too much, but I did see some videos of some extensive block fires around, Campus Drive into Crystal Ridge Court. And for the northwestern U.S., freeze warnings for tonight from Boise up to the Caldwell region, temperatures 27 to 32 degrees. And we are expecting a major mountain wave event around Glacier National Park out towards Cut Bacon Browning. High wind warning in effect for tomorrow, southwest winds gusting to 60 miles an hour. So it will be a pretty temperamental weather day in western Montana. And I had to circle back to this. Look at the dew points in central Nevada into the interior of California. 5 degrees at Bishop, 10 at Tonopah. And of course, I used to work at the Tonopah Test Range some years ago, and 10 degrees is pretty rare. It does happen in the depths of winter when you have an extremely cold air mass. But this, however, this is more of a mid-range type air mass. 52 degrees with a 10-degree dew point, that's going to be a relative humidity probably around 10 to 20%. And take a look at China Lake, 74 over -1. Look at Mojave, 70 over -4. In the San Fernando Valley, Burbank, 80 over -1. That's a relative humidity of 4%. So that is extremely dry air. That indicates a very northerly source region and or very strong subsidence from the upper levels. And we take a look at the precipitable water charts. This indicates this string bean of very dry air, 0.1 to 0.2 inch of precipitable water. This is all part of that dry slot in the lower levels. And on the other side, there's the moisture wrapping around the other side. So now you're starting to kind of visualize what's happening in this weather system. Out ahead of it, though, this is the conveyor belt of Gulf moisture coming out ahead of that weather system, responding to the pressure falls in that lee side trough in Colorado and Wyoming. Just a very quick look at the tropics. Nothing really of concern. We've got potential tropical cyclone 15 that is taking aim on Belize. That may come inland as a tropical storm. Maximum winds 30 knots, not really much of a factor for the U.S., weakening into a tropical depression by tomorrow night. And this other thing north of Puerto Rico, what is that going to do? The GFS low-level flow in IVT shows things dominated by that system there in Belize. The stuff near Puerto Rico doesn't really come together, just trade winds and the remnants of that cold polar air pretty much dominating everything. So not much risk of anything in the U.S. as far as tropical weather. This little wave comes out across the Windward Islands around 192 hours. However, that appears to stay mostly to the south. Alaska looking to get slammed by a very heavy weather system for late Sunday and Monday. Starting out the sequence, right now we've got a large polar air mass across Alaska, Yukon, an atmospheric river coming into British Columbia, heavy onshore flow with rains, very high precipitable waters, and inland even some snow. Some of the first significant snows have occurred in northern British Columbia, southern Yukon for this season. But the big changes are coming for Sunday night as this major weather system comes out of Kamchatka and Chukotka in Siberia. As we start out during the day on Sunday, a vast nose of warm, moist advection co-located with the atmospheric river spreading across the Aleutians into the Bering Sea. The fronts located about like that. There's the warm front, the occlusion wrapping back into that Siberian weather system. The precipitation is going to start out as snow across Alaska in the interior, changing over to rain, freezing rain and sleet, and then changing back over Monday night back into snow as the major zone of cold air advection sweeps into the region. This is a pretty unusual system. Typically, these strong frontal systems are associated with deep Gulf of Alaska lows. This is about the opposite, a deep Siberian low, putting the state under strong westerly flow originating from Chukotka, Siberia. Things should clear up by Tuesday, and just kind of a moderating trend going into late next week. So let's take a look at the weather here in the U.S. Obviously, most of the action is in the Four Corners and New Mexico overnight. By tomorrow, not much change really. A lot of rain there in New Mexico. We start advecting more and more of that warm air into the state, and we start clearing out some of the snow. The eastern U.S. under the influence of that large high-pressure area, 1032 millibars across Virginia, so will be another cool night in that part of the country. Then going into Sunday, rains continue in Colorado and northern New Mexico, confined to the western panhandles. A massive warm-up in the north-central U.S., up to 84 degrees at Minneapolis and up to 81 at Sioux Falls. Rainy once again in Seattle and Portland. Those rains expand inland going into Monday. Then for Tuesday, well, 90s return to Texas once again. Those will be mostly in the Wichita Falls area, upper 80s across much of the rest of the state, and in the southwestern deserts, returning to the mid-90s up to 96 at Phoenix and 94 at Yuma. Rains lift northward from Kansas into Minnesota, drying trend through this entire area. Another incursion of cold polar air into the northern states, but that will not go very far south, most of that affecting the northeastern U.S. and Great Lakes. And really, the extended period is going to be characterized by more of the same, just a parade of weather systems across the northern states, stagnant down south, warming back up, and even up to 100 degrees at Phoenix once again around Thursday or Friday. So, yeah, I think that's what you get in these low wave number configurations, just kind of a stagnant weather pattern. So we'll continue watching the upper level charts and see if we see a change on the horizon. And that's all I have for the Friday edition of Forecast Lab. What's the weather doing in your part of the area? Please post. I'm curious where some of our viewers are, and as I learn more about what's going on in your part of the country, I can integrate that into next week's show. And I hardly ever say it, but please comment, like, and subscribe. That kind of stuff really helps this channel. So even if you're not a Patreon supporter, you can help us out that way. Just click a button, and that does help quite a bit, so consider that. All right, we'll see you back here on Monday for the Patreon supporters and on Wednesday for everybody else. Hope you have a great weekend. Take care. Bye-bye.